Hi again. My name is Marina, founder of GBTH, a resident-based art incubator here in Second Life. Welcome to the third out of 4 videos of our Virtual Exhibition 101 series. Previously, we went through how to frame your work and also cover all the basics of lent resources. If you missed those, I highly suggest checking them out. As I mentioned before, the Virtual Exhibition 101 series is focused on sharing guidelines and methodologies that we use here at GBTH, gathered over 6 years of experimentation and learning in Second Life. The idea is that by the end of the series, you have all the key knowledge required to run your own art space. Virtual Exhibition 101 was made possible due to the invaluable support of the sponsors of this series: Bad Unicorn, Conch Island, Contraption, Tip Static, Fancy Decor, High Five, and Soy. You can find more about them in the video description. Now let's get to work. In this third video, I'll set up an exhibition of these selected artworks from exhibitions that are currently on display here at GBTH. For the gallery, I chose as an example Bad Unicorn's Brutalist building because it has some interesting features that will allow for a broader discussion when it comes to exhibition setups, which is the whole point of this video. That extra thought when selecting the building you use for your gallery will pay off in the long run, once the focus is on the actual display of the body of work in hand. Nothing holds you back from picking a completely different building each time, or for certain cases having a specific building that speaks directly to the work displayed. Just from experience, it can get unsustainable keeping up with constant changes. You want to be mindful that the size, land impact, details, rooms, walls, flow, etc. work for you and the proposition you have with your art space. As I mentioned in the previous video, you don't really need a huge chunk of land to set up your gallery, especially because what actually matters is how you manage it. As a first step, I'll actually map out the walls with colored prims so we can better understand the space we have available. Plus, it helps a lot when you're working with others. It is easier to refer to colors than "oh, that wall over there" kind of situation. Also important to consider the type of exhibition we will be hosting now. Selected works from different artists without a defined theme. With that, we have more freedom on a more loose narrative. Starting on the first floor, I'll divide this front wall in two. Keep in mind that this is the one we see when we enter and that I need wall space for the exhibition texts. To make up for that, I'll elongate them with these smaller side bits that mirror on each side. Following to the right, we have this big wall that leads to that close-up ending. I'll just add one big prim to refer to this area. Now going to the left side, I will try and keep a certain fairness on the wall distribution. For example, this wall here isn't a good location viewing-wise, but it's too short compared to the other ones, so I will color it the same as the one next to it so it can be considered as an extension. Similar thought goes to this next one. It is not as small, but it's a bit more hidden, so I will join with this other one. The two remaining walls have good sizes and locations, so they'll be mapped out as two individual walls. Going up the stairs, we have the second floor. Right upon arrival, we find ourselves in this room that is considerably smaller than the other walls that we've been mapping out downstairs, and I know this case repeats itself on the third floor. I'll map it out for now just in case. Moving forward, we have two other rooms divided by a half wall. I'll map them out with a single prim on each, just picking distinct colors to differentiate. Through this other door, we can walk to this isolated room with a super high ceiling, big windows, a ramp and stairs that gives access to the third floor. It is a trick one for being so different from the others in the building, so I will do the same as the ones before and map out with a big prim in a single color. Walking up the ramp, we arrive on the third floor. Please notice that this floor can also be reached by following up the stairs we used to go from the first to the second floor. I personally recommend walking the building opposed to just scamming around because you can have a more organic feel on how the visitor might explore the space. First thing we see is the smaller room we mentioned before. The difference here is that it has a higher ceiling. Once again, I'll just map it out with a single color prim. Then past this door, we have a deck. I'll map the floor instead, since there are no walls. Now let's take a closer look at the artworks we display here, that I've already placed on a small platform near the gallery building. I divided them all by series and hung them on these little temporary walls made out of prims. The 3D works I banded up using a black prim to separate by exhibition as well. There are 8 groups of framed artworks and 4 groups of 3D works. These pieces here have already been through the process of reviewing size, frame, etc., so I'll be keeping them as they're currently presented. For this video, the layout of the exhibit has been actually worked on previously because of time constraints. In the case of the units here at GBTH, we usually take around a week of active work and constant reviews of the setup to ensure we tried all the options for better displaying the work. So in order for this video alone to not be extremely long, I'll cut to the chase and walk you through each decision. Now that we can see the works we have to display, and being aware that for this case a more free narrative is welcome, we can start designating which work goes where based on the mapping we just did. On the first floor, we have the largest space with the largest walls, so it only makes sense picking the largest works first. As a placeholder, I usually read text from previous exhibitions, since the parameters tend to be the same. Exhibition statement, artist bio, exhibition credits, and title, all in white without background, so we can tint in world. Those will be replaced for the ones regarding this actual exhibition on the fourth and last video. Immediately next to it, we have this wall in an L shape. Based on the works we have to display here, Obedience and Amalgamated by Keiko Clementine seem to be the right fit. For the latter, we actually use wires to hang it far from the wall in the actual exhibit, so we keep it here because it also converses with the speed of the wall that retracts and causes the division of what would be a single long wall. With Obedience, the original way it was displayed has also been kept. A purposely extremely large piece placed tilted against the wall. I absolutely love how being on the floor amplifies the weight and drama of this work. Following to the right again, we have this long wall with a bit of an enclosed room in the end. Seen from the outside, this beginning here is actually nicely framed by the window. Rob Denton's self-portraits, part of his Vessels exhibit, fits like a glove. In this exhibition, the text within each group of images is part of the work itself, so it has been kept. The framing and composition of the images have also been done by Rob himself, so it remains untouched. Walking towards the left now, we see that wall we decided to join to as one. This geometric feature, along with the overall size, makes it great to display the pieces from Primitive by Grant Valeska. To keep a nice flow, I'll place the horizontal pieces side by side in this corner, giving it some space and then positioning the two vertical ones with a similar distance in the middle. Moving to this big room that has been divided in three, I'm going to work with a certain balance. The biggest remaining works are Senet's Let Me In, Let Me Out, so I'll place them in the wall immediately in front, which is large enough to receive this work without any further alterations. I quite like this hidden aspect of the other wall that we joined here to the right, so for this reason I will use this corner to display Arrow's images by yours truly that I censored for YouTube reasons. To avoid the harsh cut of the corner, I'll create new walls a bit further from the building's walls using prims. The corner itself I'll turn 45 degrees so I can fit the two smaller frames inside, and the two bigger ones on the walls made in parallel to the ones in the building. For a bit more of a polished look, I'll use this painted wall texture that comes with normal and specular maps and it's one of my go-to here at GBTH. Just select all the three prims and drop each texture in the respective areas. After that, still with the selection, go back to diffuse and then change the mapping from default to planar. Then 0.5 on both horizontal and vertical scales. And lastly, align planar faces. On the original display, aside from adding these walls, I also tinted them black with red on the faces that held the frame. I'll do the same here because it will prevent this smallish display from disappearing on this corner. In this last wall on this floor, I'll place the 4 selected works from Rei Matsuura's Chromatic Dreamscapes, and really space them out so there is breathing room between them. I don't want the pictures to get lost in this white background, so I'll paint this wall copying one of the painted frames we just used for Arrow's images, but without making it stand further from the actual wall of the building and really fitting from floor to ceiling, wall to wall. After that, I'll tint it black, then set luminance to 20 so it doesn't get too harsh on the eyes. Going up to the second floor, we encounter these 3 small rooms. Since we only have 2 remaining 2D works of 2 other artists, I'll ignore the smaller room for now. Within these 2, I'm gonna actually start by measuring the floor of both with prims, because there seems to be a difference in sizes between them. The first is 7.7 meters long, and the second is 10.1 meters long. In the smallest, I'll place the strip dish by Mish Mishabu, part of her exhibition titled Distance, which actually has been restaged twice before in two distinct buildings. Some key elements on its setup have been preserved. The quite literal distance in which the frames are hung by wires away from the walls. The vintage wallpapers that were a gift from Mish herself and that converses so well with the thematic of her exhibit. And finally, the brown carpet floor. Here I'll keep them, limiting the area they occupy based on the door frames of this building. For this other room, we have Amanda's New Year's Eve, which is actually a video installation, but for this case now, I had to adapt and show stills as single images. The TVs we used are no copy, and the standard way of displaying media in Second Life didn't suit our needs. For this executive change, the artist has been consulted and agreed on it. This is also one of the very few cases I'd make the use of the Fulbright feature on the Textures tab, since the stills were placed on a frame that simulates a light box, therefore it would be a light source itself. I've actually also added a 0.03 of glow on top of that to reinforce the lightbox effect. New Year's Eve has also been restaged twice, and in both displays it had these dark walls and floor, so same process as Mish's, I'll cover the room following the door frame's boundaries. Notice how by keeping these overlays contained within the rooms, a blank pathway is created, allowing for better circulation in this floor. Moving forward, we have the isolated room with a high ceiling and access to the third floor. Here, I'll display the sculptures by Bebel, Vincent Priestley, and Rachel Breaker. Please keep in mind that displaying sculptures doesn't mean we're making an art installation or environment. First, I'll sketch out with prints the flow of the space. With this, I want to figure out the areas of the room where I can display the works I have in hand, since they don't necessarily have to be up against the walls. Starting by the door, a straight line goes into the wall in front, and then I copy and turn 90 degrees as I guide to the bottom of the stairs. I'll also trace an alternative path going over the opposite side of the room. Now I can start placing the works and testing the layout. For example, Bloom 2, part of Guela by Bebel, is this massive, beautiful suspended sculpture that the artist himself offered this version with the wires. Getting it to hang from the middle of the ceiling only makes sense here, because it's high enough to not fully block the view and offers a great reference to the placement of the other sculptures. As I mentioned, I won't be resizing any of the pieces since the current sizes have been decided by the artists themselves. So, for instance, this piece that is literally called Skinny Section on Some Tables, part of Rachel Breaker's Surface of Mars installation, fits well on this wall immediately to the left from the bottom door. Not only lengthwise, but also because it allows a continuous flow by not blocking the entrance. The next two big pieces are Soft Body 2, part of Décoiffé by Vincent Priestley, and Carangueja 3, also from Bebel. I'll place them against this large wall, with Vincent's on the left side and Carangueja on the right, since its bright color won't make it disappear from the entrance view. And walking forward, we can see them properly. Lastly here, we have two groups of smaller sculptures by Vincent and Rachel. Because of their size, I'll use as a support several copies of the simple side table from Soy. Whenever we incorporate pieces of furniture as exhibition displays, the idea is for them to be as non-disruptive as possible. Since they're smaller, I'll use this L-shaped corner formed by the stairs and ramp. I'll also keep them separated. The four head sculptures by Vincent will be on the shorter side, and I'll space the tables a bit because the width of some would cause them to overlap. From Rachel, we have 8 sculptures and all of them fit nicely on the tabletops, so I'll just make them stand side by side on this larger end of the L. Going up the stairs, we have the third and last floor. Here is where I'll display the selected pieces from the final round of the GBTH Rachel Breaker exhibit. It just fits right because when I originally came up with this proposal, it was intended to be displayed outdoors. The twist this time is to exhibit the figurines on a much narrower space. On the current display of this actual exhibit, I made a sort of suspended garden on an elevated road, tracing a loose path using planters with organic shapes, highly inspired by Brazilian landscape architect Roberto Burle Marx. For this case now, since the space is smaller, I'll simply pack them all together in an organized chaos. I'll turn them all to the center so the figurines can be properly seen by those who are walking in this deck. And the order of placement will be based on, once again, flow. Please notice how all the figurines are in these white stands, and in front of those stands we have the info about each piece. I do enjoy how, in this case, the bases of the figurines blend with the floor, so the eye can have a sort of rest from all the visual info we have looking straight forward. Another interesting point of having this selection on a narrower space is that we have no option but to get really close to each figurine, which refers back to the avatar to artwork relation mentioned in the first video. And that's a wrap, sort of. The exhibition isn't completed, and I'll go over that in our fourth and last video. Lightning, texts, wayfinding, and invaluable tips that I promise will be worth your time. See you then!